Now I saw in my dream that Christian did not have to go very far by himself. He was joined by one whose name was Hopeful, being made so by observing the examples of Christian and Faithful in what they said and did during their sufferings at the fair. The two of them entered into a covenant with one another, vowing to be companions. So followed the death of one who died bearing testimony to the truth. Another was raised up out of his ashes to be a companion with Christian in his pilgrimage. And Hopeful related to Christian that before long many more people from the fair would set out to follow them. Not long after they had left the fair, I saw that they overtook one who had been traveling ahead of them. They asked him, "Where are you from, sir? And how far are you traveling this way?" He answered that he had come from the town of Fair Speech, and that he was on his way to the celestial city. "From Fair Speech?" asked Christian. "Are there good folks living there?" "Yes, I certainly think so," he answered. "Tell me, sir, what may I call you?" asked Christian. "Oh, I'm a stranger to you, as you are to me. If you're going to be traveling this way, I will be glad to have your company, but if not, I will have to be content." "This town of Fair Speech," Christian said. "I've heard of it, as I recall. People say it's a wealthy place?" "Yes, I assure you that it is, and I have many rich relatives there." "Who are your relatives there, if you don't mind me asking?" "Well, almost my whole town. Let's see, some of the more notable ones are Lord Turnabout, Lord Time Server, Lord Fair Speech, from whose ancestors the town first took its name. Also, there are Mr. Smooth Man, Mr. Facing Both Ways, Mr. Anything. Our pastor, Reverend Two Tongues, is my mother's own brother. To tell you the truth, I've now become a gentleman of high standing, even though my great-grandfather was only a boatman, looking one way and rowing another. Actually, I receive most of my estate from those of the same occupation." "Are you a married man?" asked Christian. Bayan smiled proudly. "Yes, and my wife is a very fine and virtuous woman, who's also the daughter of such a woman. She's Lady Faining's daughter, and so comes from a very honorable and prestigious family. She's acquired such a high degree of poise and sophistication that she knows precisely how to conduct herself with both prince and peasant alike. It is true that our faith differs in some respects from those of the stricter sort, but only in a couple of minor points. First, we go with the flow. We never strive against the wind or current. Second, we are always more zealous for religion when it is refined and elegant, wearing silver slippers, so to speak. We love to walk boldly in the streets with religion when the sun is shining upon it and people are applauding it." After hearing this, Christian stepped aside to talk to his friend Hopeful. "It dawns on me that this man may be Mr. Byans from Fair Speech. If it is, we have in our company as tricky and deceitful a person as lives in all these parts." "Well, ask him," said Hopeful. "I don't think he'll be ashamed of his name." So Christian returned to him again and said, "Sir, in listening to you talk about yourself and your views, if I'm not mistaken, I have a pretty good idea who you are. Are you Mr. Byans of Fair Speech?" "That is not my name, but yes, it is a nickname that was given to me by some who cannot stand me. I must be content to bear it as a reproach as other good people have had to before me." "But did you ever give anyone good reason to call you by this name?" "Never, never. The most I ever did was to give reason for calling me this name was that I have always had the good luck to be able to adjust my views to the present trends of the times. Whenever I've had a chance to gain, I've employed this ability, and if I've prospered in this way, let me count it as a blessing. But don't let those who are malicious burden me with their scorn." "I thought you were the man I'd heard of," Christian responded. "Let me tell you what I think. I fear this name is more appropriate for you than you're willing for us to believe." "Well," said Byans, "I cannot help what you think. You will still find me a good traveling companion if you allow me to continue walking with you." "If you travel with us," said Christian, "you'll have to go against the wind and current, and I believe this is contrary to your belief. You must also embrace this faith not only when it wears silver slippers, but also when it's dressed in rags. You must stand by it when it's cast into prison as well as when it parades triumphantly through the streets and receives applause." "But you shouldn't impose your views on me, nor lord it over my faith," responded Byans. "Allow me to walk in my liberty, and at the same time continue on with you." "No," said Christian, "unless you intend to do what I've presented to you, as we intend to do, we won't be traveling another step together." Then Byans said, I will never desert my old principles. Not only are they harmless, but they are also very profitable for me. If I cannot go with you, I must continue on as before and go by myself until someone comes along who will enjoy my company." Now I saw in my dream that Christian and Hopeful left him and went on ahead. Keeping their distance from him, after a while one of them happened to look back and saw three men following Mr. By-ends. As they caught up with him, they greeted each other warmly. Their names were Mr. Hold the World, Mr. Moneylove, and Mr. Save All. Mr. By-ends had known all of them previously. In their younger years they had been schoolmates and had been taught by Mr. Graspman. He was a teacher from the town of Lovegain, a center of commercialism in the northern county of Coveting. This teacher had trained them well in the art of getting ahead by whatever means, whether by violence, cheating, flattery, lying, or by putting on an external appearance of religion. These four had excelled to such a degree in their teacher's art that each of them could have run such a school by himself. After they had greeted one another, Mr. Moneylove asked Mr. By-ends, "Who are they on the road ahead of us?" For Christian and Hopeful were still within view. Mr. By-ends replied, "They are men from a distant country who are in their own way going on a pilgrimage." "Too bad. Why didn't they wait so we could enjoy their company?" asked Mr. Moneylove. "After all, aren't we all going on a pilgrimage?" "Yes, we are indeed. But those men up ahead are very rigid and dogmatic. They love their own opinions to such an extent that they've precious little regard for anyone else's. A person could be very godly, but if he doesn't agree with them on every point, they'll thrust him completely out of their fellowship." "Well, that's bad," said Mr. Save-All. "However, we've read about some who are overly righteous. The extreme legalism of this type of person drives them to judge and condemn everyone else but themselves. But please tell me, on what and on how many points did you differ?" "True to their headstrong manner," replied Mr. By-ends, "they've concluded that it's their duty to rush forward on their journey no matter what the weather, and I, on the other hand, am for waiting for favorable wind and current. They are for risking all for God at the snap of a finger. I'm for taking advantage of every opportunity to secure my life and estate. They are for holding on to their ideas, even though all the world would be against them. I, however, am for religion in so far as the times, conditions, and my safety allow it. They are for religion when walking in rags and abuse. I am for it when it walks in silver slippers, in sunshine, and with applause." At this Mr. Hold the World spoke up. "Ah, yes, Mr. By-ends, hold to your position. In my opinion, whoever has the freedom to keep what he possesses, but is unwise enough to lose it, is a fool. Let us be wise as serpents. Make hay when the sun shines, and can't you see how the bee lies still all winter, but rouses herself again only when she can enjoy her gain? Sometimes God sends rain, and sometimes sunshine. If they are such fools as to go through the rain, let us be content to take the good weather along with us. As for me, I like that religion best that will favor the security of God's good blessing to us. Can anyone who listens to the dictates of common sense imagine that God, who has bestowed on us the good things of this life, does not want us to keep them for his sake? Abraham and Solomon grew rich through their religion, and even Job says that the good man shall lay up gold as dust. But these great men differ from those two ahead of us, if they are as you say, as you have described them. I think we all agree concerning this matter, so there is no need to discuss it any further." Mr. Moneylove agreed. "No, we need not waste any more words over this matter, for he who believes neither Scripture nor reason, and we have both on our side, neither knows his own liberty nor seeks his own safety." "My brothers," said Mr. By-ends, "as you know, we're all going on a pilgrimage, and for a positive diversion from unpleasant things, allow me to propose this question. Suppose a person, a minister, a businessman, or other, should have an opportunity to get the good blessings of this life. However, the only way he can attain them, it seems, is to become extraordinarily zealous in certain religious matters that he previously had shown no interest in. Can he still be an honest man while taking advantage of this means to achieve his end?" At this Mr. Moneylove quickly replied, "I can see your purpose in asking this question, and if you gentlemen will permit me, I will propose a suitable answer. First of all, I would like to speak to your question as it concerns a minister. Suppose a minister, a worthy person, has received very little compensation, but has set his sights on a much higher standard of living. Suddenly he has the opportunity of getting it. but by being more studious, by preaching more frequently and zealously, and by altering some of his principles in order to accommodate the disposition of his listeners, as far as I'm concerned, I see no reason why a man may not do this, and even a great deal more, provided he has a calling from God. He's still a man of integrity, and here are my reasons why. First, no one can argue the legality of his desire for greater compensation, and God himself has set before him the opportunity to improve his lot, so then he may get it if he can do so without any question of conscience. Second, his desire for more money makes him more studious, and thus a better teacher and a more zealous preacher. He's therefore greatly improved himself and is a better man for it, and this is obviously in accordance with the will and purpose of God. Third, his accommodation to the dissenting opinions of his people by yielding some of his principles in order to serve them will exemplify a self-denying spirit and a gentle yet winning demeanor. Thus he will demonstrate that he is all the more fit to fulfill the obligations of ministry. Fourth, I will conclude by saying that a minister who exchanges a little for much should not be judged as covetous for doing so. Rather, since he's improved his lot in life and in so doing has also improved his level of competence in his work, then let him be viewed as one who diligently pursues his calling and makes the most of every opportunity that has been given to do him good. And now to the second part of the question. Concerning the businessman you mentioned, let's suppose his business has been meager in this world, but by becoming religious, his market may improve dramatically. He may be able to get a rich wife or more numerous and perhaps wealthier customers. I am of the opinion that there's no reason why this could not be legitimately done. And this is why. First, to become religious is commendable, regardless of the means by which a person does so. Second, there's nothing wrong with getting a rich wife or more or better customers. Another way of looking at it is the one who receives these blessings by becoming religious gets good things from good people by becoming good himself. So here we have a good wife, good customers, and a good livelihood, all by becoming religious, and that is good. My conclusion, then, is that it is a very good and profitable objective to become a devout person for the purpose of receiving all these benefits. Mr. Moneylove's answer to Mr. Byon's question was well received and highly applauded by all of his companions. They heartily endorsed all of his conclusions and thought them to be extremely insightful and profitable. The thought occurred to them that no one would be able to refute these arguments, and because Christian and Hopeful were still within earshot, and in light of their earlier opposition to Mr. Byon's, they all decided to quickly catch up with Christian and Hopeful in order to present the same question to them. So they called after the two until they stopped and waited for them. Meanwhile, as they were walking to meet them, it was decided that old Mr. Hold the World would pose the question to them instead of Mr. Byon's. They didn't want Christian and Hopeful's answer to be influenced by the heat of controversy kindled between them and Mr. Byon's at their earlier parting. The group caught up with the two, and after a friendly meeting, Mr. Hold the World posed the question to Christian and his friend, inviting them to answer if they could. This was Christian's reply. Even a baby in the faith can answer 10,000 such questions. For it is wrong to follow Christ for loaves and fish as it is, how much more an abomination is it to use him and religion as a means to get and enjoy the world? Only pagans, hypocrites, devils, witches, and sorcerers are of such an opinion. Let me explain. First, let me tell you about pagans. Hamor and Shechem wanted Jacob's daughter and his cattle as well, but they saw that there was no way to obtain them except by being circumcised. They told their friends, if every male among us is circumcised as they are, won't all their cattle, money, and everything of theirs become ours? In seeking to obtain daughters and cattle, they used religion as a pretense to get what they wanted. You can read the whole story. Then there are the hypocritical Pharisees. They were of this same faith. Long, impressive prayers were their pretense, but their intent was to cheat widows out of their houses. God will judge them with greater damnation. Third, there are the devils, of which Judas was one. He was also of this religion. He was so religious that he could carry the common purse, hoping that he might possess what was inside. But he was lost, cast off, the very son of perdition. Then fourth are the witches and sorcerers. Simon was of this religion, for he desired to receive the Holy Spirit only for the money he hoped to gain with his power. Peter sentenced him accordingly. Fifth, I cannot help but believe that the person who takes up religion in order to gain the whole world will also throw it away just as quickly in order to gain the world. Judas, for example, hoped to gain the world by embracing the faith, but he subsequently sold his faith, as well as his master, for the same purpose. Therefore, to answer this question affirmatively, as I perceive you've done, and to say that such a motive can be viewed as acceptable in authentic faith, seems to me to be pagan, hypocritical, and devilish. If you adhere to this position, your reward will be according to your works." At this, they just stood staring at each other. No one knew how to answer Christian, so there was a prolonged silence between them. Hopeful was pleased with the soundness of Christian's reply, but Mr. Byends and his friends lagged behind in order to keep a good distance between Christian and Hopeful and themselves. Christian said to his brother, "If these men cannot stand before mere mortals, how will they stand before God? And if they're silenced by mere earthen vessels, what will they do when they're rebuked by the one whose tongue is a consuming fire?"